Happy little games. Digitized images are nothing new when it comes to arcade games. Ever since I was a wee little peckerwood, one of the earliest games I remember seeing at my local bowling alley was Journey by Midway. This game sees you collect the band Journey's instruments, which were stolen by alien fans and scattered across 5 planets. Although the bodies of the characters are traditional pixel art, the faces are digitized images of the 5 members of the band. Since that time, technology has advanced, including some options for the home user which I owned back in the day, such as computerized for the Commodore 64. Digitized sprites were far more prevalent in the 90s and 2000s, with everything from Street Fighter the movie to Chinese Exorcist to Terminator 2 to Narc and of course Bikini Karate Babes in 2002. There was one belt-scrolling brawler that deserves special mention because it was the first of its kind to use digitized sprites, which is the game we are looking at today, Guardians of the Hood by Atari. What was the original working title for this game? What unpublished sequel used characters from this game? Let's find out as we get ready to rumble. This is the history of Guardians of the Hood. The year is 1991 and game designer Gary Stark is hard at work on his next arcade game for Atari. Before continuing on with the history of Guardians of the Hood, we have to go back a couple of years and look at the game that was developed in 1990, which was Pit Fighter. Now let me take off my documentarian hat for just a minute and put my fanboy hat on and put it out there front and center. I actually liked Pit Fighter. I have admitted this to my close friends and also in a room full of 300 people. It seems recently though the game has caught a lot of flack for some reason, which I would assume is due to the parallels with Mortal Kombat. Yes, Mortal Kombat is a much better game with better digitized visuals, but the game was also released 2 years after Pit Fighter. Anyway, just wanted to say my piece. For those of you who don't know, Pit Fighter is a 3-player simultaneous fighting game in which you have to battle through a number of digitized baddies to prove how totally studly you are, earning money with each fight that you win. The game used scaling effects to zoom in and out of the action, and they were really impressive for the time. There are various weapons you can pick up, such as crates, sticks, motorcycles, and the crowd will even get involved in the action, handing you items to use. As I mentioned, the game was extremely successful and Atari knew they had a hit on their hands as soon as the game was released. Almost immediately, development on a sequel entitled Pit Fighter 2 was started, but early in development, the higher-ups at Atari felt that a scrolling beat-em-up that would compete with the likes of Capcom's Final Fight would be a perfect use of the digitized technology that was used in Pit Fighter. According to internal Atari documents, the code name of the project was Warrior, although other names were considered as well, such as Hood Guardians, Street War, Crime Watch, and Streets of Crack, among others. Similar to how the recruitment of the original actors for Pit Fighter were chosen, Mr. Stark frequented local gyms and recreational centers looking for his stars. I was able to unearth some little scene screen tests from the project, which include some characters that didn't make the final cut even though their parts were filmed. Thanks to the increased budget this time around, the cameras and software were given a significant upgrade. The game would use a bit more of everything that made Pit Fighter so much fun in my opinion, including more characters, more weapons, and more humor. Development took about 9 months with various name changes throughout the course of the project. The gang known as the Shavers were initially known as the Skinheads. The Tongs were changed to the Dragons, etc. There would be 4 players to choose from initially, but after defeating each boss, they would become selectable to help you in your fight. Initially, the game was going to be a 4-player simultaneous game, but due to time constraints, it was stripped back to 3. There was also going to be more variants in the bad guys, which would have seen the numbers increase from 4 to 6 per gang. There was also going to be something similar to the FBI's most wanted list in the game, but that was dropped as well. The higher-ups at Atari were so convinced that they had the next big thing, they even filmed a promotional video to hype the game. Guardians of the Hood was released by Atari Games in 1992. Atari's internal documents help flesh out the story just a little bit more. You and your pals grew up in this neighborhood. You went to school together, went to the movies together, you even competed in sports together. The neighborhood was once a friendly place. But things have changed. The streets are no longer safe. Punks and various gangs have invaded the neighborhood, turning it into a war zone. Drugs, extortion, gang fights, the works. Even the police are intimidated. But you are not. Can you just stand by and let it happen? No way. The great big bad of the game is Mr. Big. No, not that Mr. Big, or even that Mr. Big. This Mr. Big proves to be quite tenacious as he taunts you in between each level. Introduced by the way of 3 to 4 frames of animation are the combatants, which include Connor, who is a superb street fighter, Chief, who is a former wrestler and out for revenge, Javier, who is a top kickboxer and is well endowed with speed and agility, and last but not least, Tanya, who can ride her bicycle really fast. No idea if she was doping during this or not. The game takes place across 4 levels, which are broken up into smaller parts for each of the opposing gangs. At the end of each wave, you have to deal with a mini-boss, and if you are successful in defeating him, he will join you in your fight. The controls are a bit more complicated this time around, including 5 attack buttons, which include a fast kick, a fast punch, and also a strong kick and a strong punch. There is also a block button you can use as well. There are hidden Street Fighter type moves, but I had trouble pulling them off consistently. More buttons and maneuvers though doesn't necessarily mean it's a better game because the controls are unresponsive. For some reason, the game controls worse than Pit Fighter even though all the technology involved had been upgraded since that game was developed 2 years prior. When it comes to the 4 characters in the game, a nice feature is the ability to switch characters between levels, giving you the chance to see if the other ones control any better. But I think we know the answer to that one already. If you are playing in single player mode, a lot of times only one enemy will attack you at a time. If you play in 2 and 3 player mode, the enemy count does go up. Something else that is a bit jarring while playing this game is that the enemies will flash with the more damage they take. It's not just the bosses either. Every single enemy will flash, causing an almost epileptic seizure if you play for too long. After each section, you are taken to a gym where you will face off against one of your brothers in arms similar to Pit Fighter. The first person to 2 rounds continues on in the game. If you lose, it's game over. The same thing even happens in 2-player mode. Littered throughout the various disgusting levels are various weapons you can use to do a little spring cleaning, including sticks, barrels, exercise bikes, and homeless people. Apparently they don't mind as they are just standing in the background waiting to be thrown like a lawn dart at various people. If the thought of throwing homeless people doesn't appeal to you, keep your eyeballs peeled for the flashers on the subway level. These scurvy, pervy men don't have a preference when it comes to exposing themselves, so feel free to pick them up and use them as a weapon. Being thrown as a projectile doesn't seem to bother these guys because after getting knocked around, they get back up and continue their devious ways. There are other individuals in the background as well, including prostitutes and little old ladies. It's entirely possible there could have been little old lady prostitutes, I just didn't see any. Don't even think about knocking them around because they will give you a backhand that will make your head spin. The backgrounds are interactive as well, seeing you kick the heck out of a taxi cab, beat up a parking meter, etc. Since we are in the hood, the levels are a bit seedy to say the least. In the backgrounds, you'll see tattoo parlors, adult theaters, subways, strip clubs, and more. The graphics, though, aren't just ugly, they are downright pug-fugly. Once again, Pit Fighter looks so much better, and the crazy thing is, one of the things Atari set out to do was improve upon the graphics and animation of Pit Fighter when creating this game. I don't think they succeeded. The scaling effects found in Pit Fighter do look better here, but that's about the only positive thing I can say. The levels you will encounter are the streets, the back alley, the adult theater, The subway. Chinatown. The strip club. And the boardwalk. The bosses you will encounter are JJ, Boris, and Quan. After defeating all these enemies, you make your way to the boardwalk and face off with Mr. Big, who reveals himself to be Mrs. Big. She is a strong little vixen and is way overpowered, but with enough perseverance and free credits thanks to your favorite emulator, you should be able to take her down like Charlie Brown. Once you do, a nice ending sequence is shown in which you are now a hero, having saved the hood. At the Summer Consumer Electronics Show of 1993, Tengen revealed the follow-up to their successful Pit Fighter arcade conversion, Pit Fighter 2 for the Sega Genesis. The game was going to combine elements from Guardians of the Hood and add in original characters into the Pit Fighter format. Magazine spreads of the game were also featured in the late summer issues of GamePro and Electronic Gaming Monthly. There were 6 fighters to choose from, including the 3 original characters from Pit Fighter, as well as Connor, Chief, and Tanya from the Hood. Javier, the well-endowed kickboxer from Guardians, was not quite well-endowed enough because he didn't make the cut. Some of the bosses would have remained the same, however Mr. Big is now known as Helga. The game would play very similar to the original Pit Fighter and was slated to be released in the fall of 1993. Rumor has it, the game was close to completion but was pulled at the last minute. No prototypes have ever surfaced online. As you can tell just from looking at the game, it's not very good. I saw it in my arcade once, and when I came back the next week it was gone, never to be seen again. The game had a bit of a stank to it, which made the arcade smell for at least a few weeks. Pit Fighter had its issues, but it was still fun to play and controlled decent enough in my opinion. The game takes everything Pit Fighter was and tries to add too much while not properly investing enough time and resources to make a good game. After the monumental success of Pit Fighter, Atari saw dollar signs, but rather than develop a follow-up to the original, they tried to change way too much and it all fell apart. A belt-scrolling digitized brawler sounds like a lot of fun if done properly, which, as you can see, was not the case. The game was never converted to any home systems and was never released on any sort of compilation. So the only way to play this is through MAME, or if you are unfortunate enough to find it in the wild. However, if the name of your game is pain, you owe it to yourself to download this and check it out. You'll be sad you did. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Also, if you would like to support me on Patreon, please click the link below. Thanks everybody for watching.